GMGM, welcome to another Touchgrass podcast. Today we have a really special one. I would say, KG, this is more of a reactive podcast. This is the first time we've done one where we asked Nirav on Friday and we're shooting on Sunday and we're going to post it on Monday. Obviously, we've had Nirav on the show before. We've talked a lot about Camp Network. We've supported Camp Network a lot. Nirav, thanks for giving us the exclusive on, talking about all the airdrop criteria, talking about mainnet. How are you feeling? Love the sunglasses.
Thanks, Rashid. Thanks, KG. Great to meet you. It's a lovely day in New York. It's been an extremely hectic 3 weeks, to say the very least, but it's only going to get more hectic, and lots of teas on this podcast, and very much appreciated to be here.
For sure. Can you sort of set the stage for us? Like, talk to us about your experience sort of teeing up into this sort of TGE process. I don't want to talk about the last 3 days. Talk to me about the last 3 weeks. How's the team been feeling? How's the ecosystem been feeling? How's the community been feeling? How are you viewing everything as like the founder for Camp Network?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Rachit. I mean, look, I think most projects tend to view TGE as this end all be all, which, in my opinion, is the wrong way to approach it. I believe that sort of TGE is the beginning of everything, right? You look at sort of the ecosystem, in order to get mainstream adoption, you obviously need to be on mainnet. Otherwise, it's testnet, right? Like, who really knows if these transactions are real and who really knows if these are fake? And so, we announced testnet on May 4th and sort of have been chatting with the exchanges since then. And, now that it's coming to fruition on this Wednesday, I think the ecosystem is more psyched than it's ever been before. I think a lot of people are really excited about, now that we're officially launching, we can sort of make moves and do things that they've wanted to do the entire time. Whether that comes to TVL, capital formation, or community incentives, it's all sort of coming to fruition right now, mostly. I think on the team side of things, people are really excited. Anytime I think in blockchain, especially where the narratives shift every 1 to 3 weeks, honestly, is probably a generous way to phrase that. But anytime you can sort of set a goalpost and say, hey, this is a big new deadline, this is something we're really excited about, that gets the team really excited overall. And so the team morale is incredibly high. I don't think we've ever been this excited overall. Team is continuing to work hard. It's come to the point where my job is completely useless, to be honest with you. I just get to wake up on Sunday and do these podcasts every year because our team is so well designed in terms of, doing the BD and growth in terms of partnerships. Here are the right DevX partners that we should be working with. Here are the right customers that we should be introducing some of our portfolio ecosystem to. And then on the engineering side, now that we've sort of geared up, internal mainnet is ready. And so we're super stoked for Wednesday overall at 9 a.m. UTC. Subtle chill over there, but just saying.
Awesome. And talking about sort of ecosystem partnerships, obviously, in the airdrop criteria, you've done a lot of work with Click and Billions both. Evan, Charles, welcome to the show. Do you want to give a short intro for our audience? They all know Nirav already. I'd love for them to know you guys as well.
GM, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. It is wonderful to be here with you. My name is Evin McMullen, co-founder of the Billions Network, which is the universal human and AI network. We make it easy for you to prove who you are from the comfort of your device. No creepy hardware, no collection of data outside of bounds. Rather, we use zero knowledge proofs to make it easy to prove that you are a unique human being and to support teams like Camp and our partners with Click to make sure that on-chain value distribution goes to the right audience, which means not sybils and not bots.
Awesome. Charles, you want to give a short intro as well?
Yeah, I'll keep it super brief. I'm Charles, resident slave at Click. What we do in a nutshell is we are a third-party vendor building highly bespoke airdrop solutions for clients. So to be less abstract, you can go from your checkers, your registration portals, to even the claim interfaces. Most folks in this space have this notion that claim interfaces are quite generic, but I think our thesis that we struck a year ago was that there are more tokens now than ever. Crypto has this massive inherent alignment problem, right? So more teams opt in for higher degrees of personalization. The trade-off of that is that an ecosystem, a product would have a gajillion things on their plates. The claims in itself is a one-time solution that they would allocate unnecessary workload for. It's a high traffic event. There's a lot of risk. That's where we come in to kind of abstract the complexities of all of that so they can focus on their core products. But yeah, we worked with a couple cool teams, Camp being one of them. It's great being on the show.
Awesome. Why don't we just get into the airdrop stuff? Every time some big project it does airdrop, there's always some kind of FUD going on, and some kind of people are going on Twitter writing all these threads on what's what and what's wrong and everything. Like walk us through what happened with the whole FUD around what's happening on Twitter. Why are these people hating suddenly when they were so much loving what was happening on Camp? And maybe also walk us through how Charles and Evin are working with Camp on kind of managing the whole airdrop.
Yeah, definitely. Well, could do an entire TED talk on the situation. So I think the big thing is every time you sort of do a pretty public facing announcement, whether it's airdrop or tokenomics overall, the community tends to have a very visceral reaction is some way of it, but it's just like an outwards reaction overall. So I think the thing is, I would say Camp is probably one of the most loyal communities on the planet. If you look at our Discord, people tend to generally be super happy with the way that we're doing things. Evan and I have spent a lot of time together since her disco days as well, and then obviously becoming Billions now. Charles and I have been very close for a while, and so one of the things we really thought about is like, how do we figure out who the real users are? Like I've always pitched this, and Ratchet and KG, I think I talked to you guys about this last time, where I pitched this grand vision where I think if we're still talking about users coming on chain via the blockchain in about a year and a half, we're screwed as an industry, because we believe that the form factor by which users should actually be coming on chain is through the application layer. And so I've always pitched this sort of app layer dream and whatnot. And fundamentally, what that is not useful for is farmers. Effectively, there's usually one person or two, call it 1,000 people who try to create 100 wallets and just absolutely farm the shit out of the testnet overall, whether that's through referrals, questing, or whatnot. But fundamentally, that's not useful when it comes to how do I reward my real community overall and whatnot. And so the way we sort of thought about doing that was Evin has developed an amazing proof of uniqueness product, which is different from KYC, and I'm sure she'll get into that in a couple minutes over here overall. And then Charles had sort of done a lot of work around building airdrop infrastructure overall for people. And so our first thought was like, number one, how do we give rewards to the real Camp community? That's number one. And then I think the second thing is, we've always tried at Camp to be very community centric. And what I mean by that is when we had the L2, as most of you guys remember, we sort of listened to our teams and they were like, hey, here's the downside of this L2, here's the upside of this L2. And that's why we actually decentralized an L1. Our thesis was listen to our customers at the end of the day. And now we sort of said, listen to our community. Originally we did a $10 registration fee plus Billions because that way we thought it's super easy to make sure that these are all completely real humans as opposed to one farmer who's just going to fund like 1,000 wallets. And, $10 then is expensive for most people overall. Then what the thing we realized is, $10 is a lot for anybody. And now that we're using great tech like Billions, it's really difficult for some of these people to pay the $10. So we waived the registration fee and we're refunding everybody. Those are the types of things that we're trying to really do here in order to reward the dedicated set of Camp community users that we really want to. And so we worked with Evin and Charles on this, and I'm sure maybe it's a good segue into this, but like Evin, how do you sort of see this Billions sort of like POU being the norm moving forward as opposed to trying to continuously reward these like anons overall?
Totally.
Yeah, and before you sort of get into this, I want to show this really funny tweet that I saw the other day. It literally said video KYC because Camp users are beautiful. I thought that was hilarious in these days. But yeah, no, I think the entire community has been talking about like this KYC angle, and when we were talking before the pod, like it was the first time even I understood that with like proof of uniqueness is different from KYC. Can you sort of get into the details of how it's different and sort of how Billions technology powers this?
Absolutely. So Billions is here to kill KYC because the KYC process that most of you all are familiar with, the act of filling out forms to do something like, prove that you're a qualified individual to interact with something like a bank, that is incredibly old school, incredibly inefficient, and usually overkill for the type of verifications that are required for something like an airdrop or on-chain incentives. And so when we say KYC, we're actually referring to a legal compliance process that really only applies to large institutions like banks. And so with Billions Network, we believe that progressive verification, or being able to verify different traits of a user, not just something like KYC that involves all of this elaborated information about you, but proof of, you said earlier, uniqueness, proof that you're a unique human being, proof of liveness, proof that you are a live human being and not a bot, that those types of information about users, those traits are the most useful for instances such as this. And so we definitely agree. I think Charles, Nirav, and I have spent a lot of time talking about this. Definitely agree that it's important to identify members of the community based on their individual identities and being able to differentiate that from sybils, from duplicate addresses, from dudes with 800 wallets who are trying to deceive a project and take more than their fair share. And so that's why we work with awesome teams like Camp, like Clique, to make it really easy to plug in these capabilities, to vibe check your users, make sure they are unique individual human beings, and then allow them to enter that personalized journey, whether it is an application experience that's specific for individual human beings or something like an airdrop.
That makes sense. And Evin, this might sound like
a small question.
I think you're going to ask the same question.
No. I was just curious regarding the deadline. I think we can clear that kind of question issue as well. Like, why was it only like a 3-day window? I think that was confusing for a lot of people. That why only 3 days to register? Was that like a big reason behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably start it over here, and then we'll sort of let Evin and Charles chime in. So that's completely on us. We launched the checker. Charles, can you be honest here? About Thursday, 2 p.m., and the registration deadline is Monday, 11:59. So, as most of you guys can tell, that's not actually 3 days. People tend to conflate business days and real days, but this is generally a pretty sleepless industry and a pretty working dayless industry. So everybody is always checking things nonstop. I mean, look, the reason why people are upset about it is usually because if you're a real user, 4 days to claim dollars is not a long time. What it really is because a lot of people complain on crypto Twitter because, they're trying to plug into the claims flow to get their 10,000 wallets to 100,000 wallets hooked up pretty easily. And again, that's exactly what we're solving for. We're just trying to make sure we reward the real users as opposed to the farmers who are basically doing everything overall. Having said that, one of the things that we're doing is with Charles and the Clique guys, they're super adaptable. And so we're keeping claims open for 4 weeks after TGE as well. So we can make sure that all our users who actually should be rewarded will have the adequate time in order to do so overall.
One thing I want to say on that front as well is, I want to applaud the Camp team for their openness and flexibility to receiving feedback and applying it at lightning speed. There are very few projects out here in the ecosystem who are as attuned to the feedback of their community and as quick to respond and make structural significant changes to their process as a result. And so I think that is definitely very commendable. I will also note that having a claim window of that duration is not uncommon. There are actually a number of projects that we've worked with that have had, comparable claim windows of about 4 days or even less. And so, while the emotional reaction and feelings of the community are very important, I do want to note that is not dissimilar from a growing industry standard that we're starting to see.
And that makes a lot of sense. And Charles, I want to tee you in to this real quick. Obviously, when the checker went live, the website was down. How have these last 3 days been on your guys' end? Are you just getting paraded with messages this entire time?
Not really. Like the server went down. We have a 2K QPS, right? So we're able to handle quite the amount of traffic, right? Even some of our largest airdrops in the past, the website subsisted. It was just because there were a lot of changes as well. So to not confuse the UX as well, we had to take the website to implement these changes and correspond. I mean, that's essentially effectively the sequence of events, right? But just wanted to chime in on a couple of points. I know someone slash camp on ethos, and then I defended that slash and I got slotted for it. But
hey, thanks, yes, Charles, by the way. I appreciate you putting your life on the line over there.
No, it's cool. It's cool. I think everything I raised up was that I think slashing is a very binary action. But effectively there was a bit of misinformation in the post as well as the claims that was commented. And this is coming from someone that's handled over 25 airdrops, right? So I think by this point in time, I would know what happens behind the scenes. A lot of people are asking why is the registration window so short? There are a couple of reasons. I'm not sure if Nirav wants to comment on this because like things are a bit like sensitive when it comes to like negotiating with like, market makers as well as like exchanges. But number one, processing data to fairly reward like communities takes a fuck ton of time, right? You're dealing with like hundreds of thousands of like wallet addresses, potentially even like up to millions. So let's say you decide to like halt the snapshot at the start of the month because like the exchanges give you a very like speculative range 2 weeks from now, right? And then suddenly they push back that date because of like whatever reason. It could be Easy's token launch. It could be like, a bear market suddenly, one of the numerous ones, for all I know. That gets pushed back. Then you have to like restart this process of like, processing all this like data. If not, what are the incentives going to be for like your users once you announce the snapshot to perpetually like engage with like the ecosystem as well? That kind of breaks like the whole momentum. So that's like point number one, right? Processing data takes like a lot of time. Second point, some of these exchanges from like experience, they'll come around in like a matter of a week and a half to like 2 weeks, right? Unfortunately, initially, most teams implemented a checker, which is a very generic solution where you connect your wallet or you like copy paste your wallet and you're able to see your tokens. We love that UX, right? It makes our lives easy. There's no window where like the users that forget to like, follow a page could miss out on like a potential airdrop. But now you've got this whole like, segue into personalization. Claim portals are no longer as generic as in the past. Even on the registration side, you need to bind the user account, like their X, like, everyone like runs Kaito campaigns nowadays, camp included. You bind like their X accounts with like wallet addresses, Discord, GitHub. And then like once you have like a claims address, then you need to like spend a bit of time in terms of like deploying a Merkle distributor contract with like that set of like values, right? In this case, of course, like Camp didn't have like social verification, but what it did have was like Billions, right? You needed to have like this flow preemptively. Otherwise, like, I'm sure Nirav like thought about this and simulated it a bunch of times. There could be a universe where he just like didn't have like Billions and then like linearly distributed an amount to everyone. And they could have been like bots for all we know, which could have like impacted like the longevity of like, especially a nascent new network, right? Or B, everyone would have received like very, very small sums because that's just like the nature of the game, right? And then there would have been like more FUD. So it's kind of like a situation where no one will ever be happy, but hopefully this should shed a bit like more light on why registration portals nowadays like exist. And more importantly, like, have maybe not generate some sympathy, but an understanding that sometimes there are just like these like matters that like loom over our heads. And unfortunately, this is just like, making the best out of like any given situation. Final point, we're partially part of the reason why like this registration portal is like slightly shorter, because in between this registration portal, I do need to like cater at least 24 hours or so, right? To process all that data, to make sure that there's any like, no duplicates, to do QC severely, because I'm sure that you can imagine my position as like a vendor. If I fuck up an airdrop, I'm not going to get much business, right? So this is just like part of like, our SOP. And for anyone that's like, slightly upset because of like the circumstances, I apologize on behalf of the company.
And then Charles, does the Kaito airdrop also sort of click into the click interface, or is that separate?
Some clients request it. I don't believe that it's going to be like the instance this time around, because Kaito has like a distribution hub, wants to like, centralize everything in like some capacity, right? So they do work with like a vendor token table that also helps them like generate like specific portals for like the yappers. And it's up to the teams really to like determine if they want to decouple the airdrop from like the yappers allocation, whether they want to like pace out the yappers allocation at like a later date. That's outside of our control.
Got it. And then on the airdrop criteria, Evin, I want to put you on the hot seat. With the rise of AI, is there a way I can beat proof of uniqueness with, an AI avatar or maybe one of those masks that, you can put on where you have someone else's face? Is there a way to beat proof of uniqueness right now?
You know, I look forward to seeing y'all try. But you know, part of the awesome thing about our tech stack is that we think very defensively about these different ways that folks try to be dishonest and scam projects by misrepresenting who they are. So one of the unique capabilities that we have is that, you know, we are able to use the cameras that are already inside of your laptop or your phone, and are able to discern unique human beings regardless of the shenanigans that people try to put in front of them. So often, you know, this outcome is really, you know, more straightforward to achieve with proprietary hardware, special cameras, etc. But we have yet to see, you know, outcomes where folks are wearing like weird Halloween masks or putting their dog up to the camera. We also, you know, take into account, you know, the fact that different projects require different levels of verification or want to use different ways to prove the uniqueness of their users. Some of them don't want to, you know, leverage client-side data, you know, images of their users' faces. And even though that data actually doesn't leave the device, we use zero-knowledge proofs to be able to prove traits about users. There are some teams that prefer to use things like passports. So being able to take your passport, tap it to your phone, Billions network tech stack pulls the data out of the NFC chip in your passport and actually verifies the government signature and the data inside of it as one way to verify your uniqueness. Or for some of our users and projects in India, we've integrated the national ID card. It's called Aadhaar, that does something very, very similar. And so part of the reason, you know, that Billions Network exists is because many of the solutions that existed before us were not as stringent. We're not able to filter out deep fakes. We're not able to address, you know, folks holding their pets up to the cameras. And so as, you know, as bad actors evolve, so too do we. So we've actually got some cool updates that will allow us to take this verification outside of, you know, custom built applications or applications like Billions, and even into places like video chats, like Zoom calls, Google Meets, Telegrams, because we realize that part of the challenge that you've described of people trying to misrepresent themselves is not just limited to airdrops. It is happening all over the internet. And, you know, for your viewers, I hate to say this, but sometimes people lie online. And so being able to both trust and verify is something that's really important for us in the projects we serve.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think, Richard, before we sort of dive on to the next subject, I think something that's really prudent there and like probably relevant is when you think about like crypto as an industry, historically the reputation hasn't been great. Let's be honest, right? Like it's sort of been, you know, if you talk to normal retail, not like crypto retail, about what crypto really is, it's like, oh, there's scams, it's like market manipulation, it's crime and whatnot. And a lot of that is because we have effectively Adon people basically sort of running our industry to some degree. You know, like crypto Twitter is probably the source of all truth. And as Evan mentioned, people lie online. Like it's hard. It's supposed to be hard over here. And so because of that, I think one of the things that will push our industry forward is if instead of somebody saying like fading you on Twitter under this maskless, you know, NFT, if in order for them to actually have credence or credibility to talk about it, if you can KYB them, or as Evan said, sort of the POU understanding of what KYB is as opposed to this ridiculous sort of legal nuance over here. And I think that's where this will probably trend as an industry. You know, in the equity markets, people tend to sort of, it's not the easiest thing in the world to buy Facebook stock. You have to go through and get a Robinhood account. You have to do all this stuff. It's not, let me enter 24 words on a passphrase, then effectively be able to do anything I want and sort of act like I'm God's greenest earth of mankind. And so I think that the future of the industry will largely revolve around almost like transparency, which is what blockchain was designed to be, plus a call it sense of responsibility as well, where it's like, you know, most of these things have actions overall. But that's just my 2 cents. And I think that's one of the things that we can push forward as an industry is, you know, making sure that if you do something, there's sort of some sort of consequential action overall. And I'm not saying that in like a bad way, but it's more so, you know, the minute that you actually have a stake in something, it becomes a lot easier to sort of care about the project. And the way you give a stake in something is you prove that you're actually a human, as opposed to just an airdrop farmer. And so that's why I think what Evan is sort of describing with Billions is sort of the future of where this industry is trending towards overall.
And then, Nirav, can you talk a little bit about like the gasless experience that you guys were trying to power? I know the team's working on taking away the $10 fee. What was that about? Why was the community mad? And like, what are you guys doing forward on that topic?
Yeah, it's a super good question. And like, first of all, kudos to Charles and the Clique team for sort of walking us through this and making sure that Number one, being adaptable. So like not necessarily what we initially thought we were going to do, but being able to stop on a dime, if you will, to use a hoops term, but being able to sort of change things up pretty quickly. And then second is also just being really relevant on the consultancy side, where it's like, does this make sense and whatnot. We wanted to do the registration fee for the sole reason that testnet transactions are always a hard thing to really gauge what's real and what's not real when it comes to Sybil. And so $10 to us was like, it's $10, right? Like that's sort of what it seems like is this is the right amount in order to make sure that somebody's actually willing to prove that they're willing to get the airdrop. Now, what we saw is a massive backlash from the community because basically everybody sort of said $10 is way too expensive. So we're like, should we drop it to $1? But then at that point, we're using billions. What's the difference between $1 and free, right? Like, especially if you're already doing your POU overall in general. So that was the first thing. Then the second thing is, kudos to Charles and the Clique team again, just to reiterate this. But like, one of the things we thought about is, okay, we should make users pay gas. And then we thought about it, if we're already making users POU, Charles suggested, why don't we just fund a paymaster contract? And then the minute that you do that, users have a gasless claim. At the end of the day, Camp has always been about the users. The best UX is always, and the best DevX is always what we've tried to pitch. And in order for that to happen, if you're going to claim the airdrop, you might as well be able to do it without having any Camp tokens in your wallet. And so that was ultimately what we decided to do. Again, the biggest thing we've always tried to do is make sure that we're listening to the community and adapting. And I think, again, like for the third time, massive kudos to the Clique team for sort of working with us and iterating on this, not only on a daily basis, but on an hourly basis to make sure that UX has been paramount overall. And I think for what it's worth, you've seen the community react pretty well. Like the first day, everybody was like, fuck these guys. Yeah. Like they charge $10, seen a massive POU. Then we put out a big tweet where it's like, look, you can register. It's not a big deal. We're not going to force you to like be blocked if you don't have this. Then second was like, fuck these guys. They still have the registration fees. We sort of changed that. Now, eventually, we'll get faded. Any project that's ever relevant gets faded to some degree. You can't make everybody happy. But I think the fact that we're making it registration feeless and gas feeless should hopefully contribute to a much better UX overall.
Yeah, and I think you also got on the fact that ETH prices have just been going up, and it's denominated in ETH, so like it just keeps going up. It's like $15 now. Charles, what are your thoughts on like this whole fiasco? Like how was everything at the Clique side when you were monitoring all of this?
What do you mean the gasless claims? Because are you talking about like the registration component, or are you talking about like
both?
Both. Okay. Registration wise, like okay, like I think like the biggest critique was honestly that there was a double whammy with regards to like Billions as well as like the claim the registration fee, which both technically act as like Sybil deterrents inherently, right? Coupled with like a shorter window that like led to like the biggest part of like the community backlash. But all those like points, to answer your KG like earlier, your question earlier, KG, you mentioned like the site like went up and down. That's when we actually implemented these changes, right? So you can kind of see us like working like real time, responding like as quickly as you can to like the community's like sentiment. Of course, like when Nirav and his teams like we're like, okay guys, we gotta put the community first. This is what we need to do. Claims wise, the experience behind like paymasters, honestly, like I know that Nirav like put us on a pedestal right here, but this is like pretty standard like for us because we are the only vendors that have done like a couple of, like L1 launches. In fact, maybe like a bit of like a soft brag, but I think we really made like Web3 history this week alone because we did Camp, as well as like Mitosis all in like 1 week. Each of them are like L1s. In the past, we did like Verichain, we did like Plume. So that's where we really like derive like the experience of having like a paymaster contract. Because especially on like a new network where your gas token, your airdrop token is like a gas token, you need to, it's like a chicken and egg solution, right? Either you have this like shit UX where you like bridge your assets over, and then like if there's any components of like claim fees or like whatever, then the users would just like complain, right? Then they have to like go through like a PX, bridge it to like Ethereum mainnet, from Ethereum mainnet, bridge it to like Camp over. This sucks. So our experience was just like on building like paymaster contracts and of course like optimizing the configuration of such so it can handle like enough like load, right? And the user experience will just be like one click claim. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen like the response prior and after the changes made, so it's been good, very good so far as Nirav said. But one question I had, and I think I had this question for in general for projects is that when it comes to airdrop, you partner with so many different communities, and you just don't airdrop to just testnet users or in one way. And now we have Kaito as well, and especially for Camp, you guys partnered with so many other projects, the different communities involved. How do you guys like prioritize, who comes first or how much they're allocated, and how does that kind of work when you're claiming the tokens itself?
Yeah, good cue. I mean, probably general question, so like I can turn it over to the panel. But my thoughts were, so we at Camp sort of designed 3 things around our airdrop. Number 1 was Summit Series, which was our testnet. Number 2 was our canonical NFT collection called TrailHeads, which was a paid NFT mint on ETH, which we really appreciated because that meant like you actually had to spend dollars in order to do so, as opposed to just like hitting a testnet faucet pretty egregiously. And then number 3 was Kaito. And like the Kaito meta is pretty interesting. Like I think it's pretty helpful in terms of driving mindshare. But the jury's still out on like, every so now and then when you see a company get so successful, you see other copycats come into the space, and we'll see if Kaito can maintain their edge. We're huge fans of the team overall, and as you can tell, we work really closely with them. I think it's a lot of sort of question of like, who is your real community as opposed to who's just farming the airdrop, and that's a pretty difficult seesaw to balance effectively, or XYZ level of seesaw as opposed to just 2 different dimensions overall. And so that's how I think we thought about it. But Charles, Evin, I'm sure you guys have worked with a number of projects. Here's to see how you guys think about it as well.
Evin, do you want to go first? Because you actually have, you're the only one that has like a Kaito leaderboard here, besides Nirav.
Certainly, happy to. Yes, shout out to our friends and colleagues over at Kaito who also just helped us close an awesome community round so that we can, ensure participation not only from investors but also from our ecosystem as well. I think Nirav makes a really good point that prioritizing and incorporating many different aspects of the development of a protocol are really important to take into account when it comes to sort of building out an incentive program and ensuring that that everybody participates. I think one of the unique and interesting challenges of bringing together many different communities is that you are not necessarily working from the same basis of insight about all of those different users, and that's where Billions comes in. And so there are some projects, some protocols that have different views on what constitutes valuable to them, what constitutes a meaningful use of incentives. But I think what we saw here with Camp, and certainly stay tuned for the next few months on our side in terms of Billions and how we go about this. But I think it's really important too, and admirable in these environments to center around the community. And communities are made of people. If you've got beef with something like Billions, that means that you're probably concerned that your farming wallets aren't going to be incentivized appropriately, and that is exactly the point. So although there may be FUD around solutions that are meant to be Sybil resistant, that means that the system is working as designed to recognize and reward real members of the community who are bringing value and whose interaction comes from an authentic and scalable place.
Awesome. Charles, do you have anything to add on the Kaito part?
How spicy do you want it?
However, I'm Indian. All 3 of us are Indian here.
Charles, we want the full masala over here.
Well, okay. I'll preface this. I'm a big fan of the team. I think that they've definitely pioneered a new meta, right? I see my indicator of if you've pioneered a new meta is if I see Galaxy try to build a competitor product, right? Like Starboard. Not a lot of folks know. We knew that their data, their mindshare, analytics were quite potent because we were the ones that facilitated eigenlayers like Airdrop season 1 and season 2. Season 2 had this little spice of retroactive component that definitely created a lot of splash on social media. After seeing a numerous amount of Kaito leaderboard projects, I think initially teams were drawn because it promises 3 things: attribution, growth, and alignment. But realistically, more teams are choosing Kaito leaderboards for the growth component, really to get more discovery out, which leads to an incessant clusterfuck of AI slop on everyone's timelines, to the point where people are even just muting the word Kaito, or if they want to refer to Kaito, they'll write K4ITO, right? I think that rewards fundamentally, especially on the mindshare component, it's a cool part to see it gamified, right? To see if you're like yapping harder than like a specific like user or not. But I think that it should be like retroactive in like nature. That's like my thought, right? Because if you're working towards like an incentive, then it's going to be a lot harder to unfortunately make sure that like these users are really in it because like the tech fascinates them. I've never seen so much, and Evin, this is not like, hate towards like Billions or anything else. I've never seen so much people like say that like, sybil resistance is like the path to like, the future of like Web3 suddenly. And
I'm about it though. And as you noted, at Billions, we have a Kaito board and it is not incentivized. There are no financial rewards associated with it. And that's, a little bit of a different view than many take. But I agree with you completely, Charles, that, that thinking about, the impact of that content before putting a price tag on it and promising compensation, I think is a prudent choice.
For sure. And me and KG, we've spoken a lot about Kaito on the podcast in the past. Our thoughts, I think me and KG have the same thoughts. Like people who find AI slop on their timeline, like they're probably interacting with it, which is why X is showing you AI slop. Like Elon's catered the algorithm so well, like it only shows you what you want to see. The second thing that I do think that's really helped Camp Network, and I follow the ecosystem really closely, these yappers end up promoting a lot of the budding ecosystem projects, and they get a lot of limelight from these Kaito yappers. You only see them talk about Camp Network when you think about, camps incentivizing these yappers, but you don't see how, projects like Summit X, for instance, get the second degree benefit of those yappers than talking about stuff that's happening on the Camp Network ecosystem. I think one thing that I do want to segue into, and this is going to be on like a tangent, Nirav, is I'm pretty sure all three of you guys have been, have a group chat, been talking about TGE date, have been talking about when this claim page should come on. Nirav, I want to pick your brain, and you have to be as candid as possible on this one. When you saw Jason leaving story, was that like the aha moment? Like, let's just get it. Like, this is the time where Camp's the number one IP blockchain. We have no competition. It's go time.
So first of all, I appreciate you shouting out our ecosystem, things like Summit X. That's great to hear. Like, again, blockchain is only as good as its ecosystem. Number two is when I was back in my TradFi days, we used to work a lot with Endeavor. And Ari, who's the founder of Endeavor, has this like really good quote called planned serendipity, where it's like putting yourself in situations to succeed. Look, we had our TGE date lined up, but things sometimes happen to good people over here overall. And I think the nice part about all of this is, look, we love the story team. We spent a substantial amount of time with Jay-Z and SY themselves, and sort of, in a lot of ways, they're responsible for the success of Camp, where, convincing people that data is IP, the IP is the sum of everything you do online and whatnot. And so we couldn't be happier with them. Having said that, I think, one of the things that we've seen candidly from ecosystems in the story team was like, maybe they don't get as much support as they would hope. And so we've actually chatted with a number of these projects. And I think Jay-Z leaving, I'm sure he'll probably start the next fucking $10 billion unicorn in AI or blockchain, whichever he decides to do so. He's one of the brightest humans I've ever met in my life. But I think it sort of proves that, Camp is going to be the canonical IP chain. When you think about the future of the world, 95% of all IP generated will be via AI. That's not an opinion. It's more likely a fact. And at some point, then, we want all of that IP to live on Camp directly. And that's one of the things that we're looking for. Look, I don't think IP is a winner-take-all situation, right? If it was, then there wouldn't be Sony, Universal, Warner on the music side of things. So it would just be one of them. But I will say, what I would ideally want is every time somebody thinks about creating something new, Camp should be the first version of that. And I think with Jay-Z leaving, a lot of people are going to wonder why one of the co-founders leave and whatnot. And I think that low-key strengthens our sort of reputation in the industry, because we already have worked so closely with a lot of these ecosystem teams that we're starting to get inbounds from other ecosystems. And now with this, it's sort of accelerated that timeline overall.
That makes sense. Have you spoken to Jay-Z since?
I haven't, but we'll reach out. I'm from the Bay Area. He spends a lot of time there, so we should be in a good place overall.
That makes sense. I know we're closing up on time. I just want to ask the last question about season 2. What's next? What can the airdrop hunters look for? Any alpha that you can share for season 2?
For sure. Well, Charles will kill me on this because, his job gets harder than just working for 2 weeks overall. He has to work for another 3 to 6 months on the Clique side of things, and I'm sure Evin will kill me as well. But I mean, look, again, I've always said this: TGE is just the beginning; it's not the end. And so one of the things that we get excited about is what are the next things that we can do from here. We spend a lot of time with the Web2 modeling companies, and a lot of it is around like, hey, how do we find ways to compliantly train our models overall? You saw with Reddit and GPT, it sort of set the standard of like, shit, fuck, maybe we actually need to think about doing this in a more reasonable way, as opposed to worrying about lawsuits later. When you're OpenAI and you have the backing of every single Silicon Valley investor ever, it doesn't matter. When you've raised $20 to $30 million and you get sued for $40 million, that hurts. And so that's one of the big things we're looking at. Season 2, season 3 airdrops will largely revolve around, hey, how do we actually prove you're human? What data are you onboarding? What IP are you onboarding? Are you creating new IP? And, this is not going to be like a once a year type thing. It'll be a quarterly thing. Like one of the things that we usually see is that blockchain is the lowest attention spans in the world. And so in order to keep folks engaged, you have to do things with certain goalposts that are not 1 year out, more like 3 months out. And so that's what we get really excited about, having users come on board with the application layer, create new IP, register their IP as existing, prove that we can sort of say, hey, is this okay with you? Chat with the AI companies. But I think Camp will be one of the biggest ways of changing the entire interaction on which models are trained in the future. And like, yes, this is a very grand vision, but it's supposed to be hard. Otherwise, this would just be a classic pump and dump that you see in most crypto. And that's what I think we get really excited about. And the team gets more excited about, more importantly.
That makes sense. And Evin, on your side, does the experience with season 1, is there going to be any changes in season 2? How are you guys thinking about it on your end?
So first of all, this is also a question that I get from my dad a lot, who is a huge fan of Camp Network. He is an intellectual property attorney, and so is especially stoked about what you guys are building. But of course, we are going to constantly be receiving feedback from our, our partners and their communities, and we've got some exciting updates of our own coming in the next few months. And so, you mentioned TGE. Keep your eyes peeled, viewers, because we're going to have some exciting things coming from the Billions corner as well.
Awesome.
Ratchet, that might be a little alpha drop alert. That might be an alpha drop alert right there.
That's a clipper right there. Charles, any thoughts on your end on season 2 or upcoming seasons?
Even if I knew something, I wouldn't be at like the ability to tell you anything, right? Like that would be a breach of a confidentiality clause. I don't want to get sued.
That's the realest answer we've had.
Thank you.
All podcasts. Nirav, close us out. What's your one message to all Camp community members, ecosystem teams, everyone who's paying attention to Camp Network right now?
Yeah, wow. It's a lot of pressure, Roger. I think the biggest thing is resilience, ship fast, and be patient. These good things tend to happen over time. Nobody created Rome overnight. And so in order to build something meaningful, it's not a move to just sort of jump from thing to thing. It's make sure that you test it, make sure that it works, and the good things will come over time. And so couldn't be more thankful to the Camp community for being patient with us. Lord knows it's been about 2.5 years, but only better things to come in the future.
Awesome.
Awesome.
That's all. Charles, Evin, Nirav, thank you for the Camp Yaps on my account. That's super appreciated. That all slowly. Very excited for season 1, season 2, and everything that goes on with Camp Network in the future. Thanks so much for coming on, guys.
Thanks, Richard.
Gentlemen,
thanks,
thank you so much.
Shout out to the Billions and Clique team for being some of the best vendors on the planet.
Thank you.
Awesome.